It's been our mission since I think 10 or 20 episodes into the show to fill in all of the gaps in our horror education.
Oh, yeah,
We've been back through the 60s and the 50s. We've been trying to watch all the great horror that has shaped this genre that we've completely fallen in love with.
We talked about 2 classic horrors in one of our recent Patreon episodes, if you want to check that out.
Yes,
it was
we
a little
did.
roundup. We talked about Psycho and the original Invisible Man, but that's not what we're talking
And
about today.
Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah, and Poltergeist. That's right. I blocked that one out. Spoiler, I didn't like that one. But that's not what we're doing today.
The other two are way better. But
yeah.
we watched another classic, and I think we have a little more to say about this one. Rosemary's Baby. We finally watched. We watched that one with your dad. And we have
did.
a perfect track record. The batting average of classic horror we've watched with your dad is unbelievable. It's Rosemary's Baby, The Thing, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, and Blair Witch Project.
And
we
Blair
watched
Witch.
all of those with my dad.
All
It's been a
killers.
great time.
So the latest one, a lot of every time we watch another one, there's like more pressure on it because
It's like, what if it's bad? What if it's bad?
Yeah, I know.
And we showed my dad The Lighthouse and The Witch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all been good.
We did watch some pretty terrible Halloween sequels with him, but
Well, we knew they were bad. So that was different. I don't
H2O
count
20
that.
years later.
Greatest
we
movie of all
watched-
time.
We watched Rosemary's Baby, and I've been chewing on it for a few days. The movie, not the baby. And I have some thoughts.
It. Yeah, you have some thoughts.
The thing I want to open with, just to get it out of the way, is that yes, of course this is a Faustus story.
Okay.
But I mean that more broadly than usual.
If y'all haven't been here, Cam's biggest thing, his biggest personality trait, his toxic trait, is that he makes everything a Faustus story. But you always back it up.
Yes.
You always back
And
it up.
all great stories are Faustus stories because it is the most magnetic dynamic in storytelling in human history.
Sure. Okay.
So it does pop up everywhere in good art. But I think there's another way to look at it because the whole reputation of Rosemary's Baby, so the log line that you and I have known our entire lives, even though we haven't seen the movie, is a woman gives birth to the baby and the baby's the Antichrist.
Yeah. That's pretty much all I knew going in.
That's what everyone knows. And when people think or talk about Dr. Faustus, most of them haven't read it. They know, oh, that's the deal with the devil play.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So both of these stories have a reputation entirely about the demons and the spooky stuff. But I think both works of art are very much about other things.
Mm-hmm.
So the demons become a prism, right? It's a kaleidoscope through which you can play with much funkier and more subtle ideas.
Sure, of course.
And yes, as you alluded to, I am trained in the Faustus comparison. I've spent 10 years writing about this through college, through grad school, through theses, through books I've written. This is my thing. Mm-hmm. The history of these stories, this is my pet project. Tracking the Faustus arc through artistic history. And I think Rosemary's Baby is a masterful addition to the canon because of the way it plays with and represents boundless greed. And
Okay.
there's one image that I haven't been able to shake. I mean, there are plenty from this movie, but one that really ties into the Faustus connection. And it's when all of the rich, powerful old neighbors are hailing Satan in the finale of the movie.
Uh-huh.
And that's the mask off moment. That's where they show you what they're thinking and what they're doing all along. And they're just proudly, gallantly, like screaming, "Hail Satan," over and over again. The thing that I realized that kind of screwed me up the day after we watched this is that I genuinely cannot tell if they are thanking the devil for the deal that got them there, or if they're sucking up to him in the hopes of getting even more.
Okay.
And I think that is the point.
Yeah.
I think the point of that reveal is the endless indulgence and justification.
Yeah. Okay.
The cycle of those two things, unchecked over and over again, and how they compound. Because you see how embittered and ravenous and calcified these people are in those final moments of the movie. So in this episode, I want to dig deeper into that feeling, that discomfort, that phenomenon that is gestured at throughout Rosemary's Baby.
Okay, cool.
So the phrase that's been in my head over the past few days as I've been chewing on this movie is social contagion. Because going into this movie, I was expecting an arched religious drama, maybe even some body horror, just based on the name. I didn't know
Sure.
if there would be some huge Cronenberg-y kind of birth scene where you'd see talons rip. I didn't know.
Right.
I thought it was going to be like the reputation of The Exorcist,
Yeah.
where people in the public consciousness reduce that movie to the scenes of the bed jumping up and down.
Right, yeah.
Right, the blood.
Because that's the scariest bits that stay with you.
Yeah, the pea soup, the puking.
Yeah.
That's what people talk about. And I was expecting some of that here. But I was so delighted and surprised because Rosemary's Baby is much closer to a parlor room drama.
Sure, yeah.
And really, in its execution, and this is where I lean on your expertise, almost a Jane Austen novel.
Okay.
Because it's very much, for 99% of the movie, a comedy of manners.
Yeah, it's people talking in rooms and it's like social interaction. Yeah.
But it's also about the norms of social interactions.
Of course.
The comedy of manners element means it's about what dwells beneath all of that formality. And the ugly underbelly there, and every time any of these characters picks up a rock, you see the ugly underbelly of human nature here. It's that animal competition. It's the hierarchies, the desires, the greed. And as you get to know these people, those things get uglier and uglier as the film goes on. So I want to meet the movie on that level and see past the metaphors and the symbols and the demons and try to explore the way I think the film is looking at the world. Because this whole story, this whole decaying world of the movie is incited and agitated by pretty everyday problems. Sort of like a kitchen table version of the problem of evil.
Yes.
That you and I have talked about at length through our Witcher discussions and plenty of other works of art. But I think that is the motivating philosophy for everything, all human thought. I think it's the reaction to evil.
Of course.
And here, that evil, the thing that agitates the whole plot, is intrusive, pestering neighbors.
Yes.
Annoying people who live near you. And it reminded me of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, which is the story that sort of revolutionized Batman in the 80s. It's about an older Batman who's kind of retired, but the world in the story is sort of fallen off.
Okay.
And it's grimy and dirty, and the thing that agitates the whole story is street crime. Yeah. It's basically a crime wave that sends hardened, bitter old man Batman back into being Batman, and then you get mutants and helicopters and horses. The whole story goes on from there. But it's the impetus is street crime. It's very pedestrian, everyday problem of evil type concerns.
Yes.
And here you get to demons and people screaming Hail Satan, but the thing you start with is just intrusive, pestering neighbors.
Sure, yeah. And moving into an apartment and trying to have a kid and getting annoying questions about when are you going to have kids and just trying to settle in and being a weird young couple and career concerns and just mild everyday things.
And I love the arc of those kind of stories where you have a germ of evil that upsets the characters and then it spirals into absolute insanity by the end of it. I love that level of explosion and expansion in a story. And what I want to do here is kind of chase the ripples out from that first irritant and see how the whole world falls apart because of it.
Cool.
Because by the end of Rosemary's Baby, you've gone from rolling your eyes at the neighbors to a full, Friedrich Nietzsche will to power sermon about domination and the will to dominate. And almost every story beat after the neighbors are annoying, every story beat after that, for the rest of the 2 hours, is in some form or another, Rosemary being stripped of her agency and individuality.
Yeah.
I mean, the story is a marathon. It's an endless series of her quiet concessions and compromises.
Yes.
And the thing that made me draw that Jane Austen, that comedy of manners parallel, is because until the very end, until the last moment where everyone's openly chanting about Satan and you've got the bassinet with the Antichrist in it, until that moment, it is all so remarkably polite.
Yeah, it really is, yes.
And every time you see Rosemary's response to these things, she's always reacting, right? She's always responding to these things. You see her defer and backpedal. And what does that signal to the other people in every scene? That she's a doormat.
Yeah, okay.
And you see that overstepping, the imposition, the abuse become more and more and more pronounced.
Yeah, and it's not till later when she really does try to start fighting back in a more direct and assertive way, but by then it's
way too
late.
Too late. It's way too late. And by then, and especially by the end of the movie, she is stripped of her entire life, her privacy, her medical privacy, the trust of anyone around her, and her entire future.
Yeah.
To the point that she numbly agrees to raise the demon baby because that is all that is left to her.
That's all she has. Mm-hmm.
So you ascend into sort of a surreal point by the end of the movie, but it's a way of dramatizing her inner tragedy. But I don't think it's dramatizing it by or exaggerating it by that much, because I recognized that conciliatory instinct that she shows that gets her to that point of damnation by the end of the movie. I recognize that even without the demons in myself and in everyday life. And I can see where it's going. Even though it's not going to end in the demon baby for me, I see what the film's getting at.
Okay.
Where if you let these things happen, where will it end up? I think that's sort of the first question it postures to us.
Okay, yeah.
Because ad nauseum, ad infinitum, those problems lead to an unrecognizable, selfish, crude society.
Yeah.
And if you look at the people who do take advantage of her throughout the movie, the whole world of this film becomes overrun by aggression and greed. Mm-hmm. And the same way I mentioned Problem of Evil, it tied me back to another Problem of Evil-like philosophy that you and I have played with in the Witcher conversations, in plenty of our other conversations, Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because what I think is happening here is a reversion to the state of nature.
Yeah.
Because by the end of the movie, when she's the only one playing by the rules and being nice to people, every other car on the road is a bulldozer.
Yeah.
Every night is the purge.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the only one caught out.
I see. So it's
she's
all
the only one
come
being
apart.
nice. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I keep my notes kept spiraling out into these paradoxes. And instead of avoiding them, I want to lean into and play with those questions. So if Rosemary's Baby is staging this thought experiment over the course of a film, the return to the state of nature, which is basically animal instinct. It's you take whatever you want. No one else has any rights.
Yeah,
you don't live in a civil society where you compromise some of your freedoms. You can't go over and steal and kill and do whatever you want. You limit yourself. You limit your actions under the understanding that everyone else will do the same, and therefore we'll all be safe.
Right, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what the state of nature is. So if the film is documenting a return, a slow return to the state of nature with all of that formality and finery intact, which is so much scarier, right? Because it's not people kicking down the door and just stealing whatever they want.
Right. It's like people are actually, like, in their effort to maintain this civil society, it actually results in an unraveling of it and a return to the state of nature. Interesting.
It's like that trick where people can pull the tablecloth out without anything on the table falling over.
Yeah,
Because you still have this, like, 50s sitcom setup. But at the end, everyone else has returned to the state of nature.
Interesting.
And it's dog-eat-dog, just ravenous, unsustainable horror.
Interesting.
So when does that begin? When does that reversion begin? That's sort of the next question I want to play with.
Right, because it's not like them letting going to the neighbors for dinner was a mistake, was their whole undoing.
It's a really hard thing to pin down.
Sure.
So I want to try to take the problem at its very root.
Okay.
Sort of an example that, yes, is present in the film, but is also just sort of an example we can all relate to and have all lived through. Say someone is rude. Amongst a group of people, say one of the people is rude, and no one pushes back.
Yeah.
You just kind of pretend someone farted and everyone moves on.
Right.
That happens all the time. But what is happening there in that moment? I think if I'm taking it at sort of a more philosophical and like looking below the surface way, that person is sort of breaking the social contract.
The person who's being rude?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Because everyone else is upholding sort of polite society, and by that I mean the social contract and us limiting our freedoms to feel safe. Everyone else is upholding polite society, and that one person isn't. But isn't that the moment where things start to spiral? Because then it signals to everyone else that you can kind of screw everyone over a little bit.
It goes unchecked. Like,
right.
You know, because the people around them try to keep it going. And so they don't, like in order to fight back, in order to push against that breaking of the contract, you also have to break the contract.
Right.
Yeah.
But like,
that's why you have problems with like bystander intervention in any sort of like violence or bullying or problems, is nobody wants to break that contract, but you have to in order to return back to the peaceful state.
And it kind of communicates to you, when the whole society doesn't break down, it doesn't turn into a zoo, that you can break it a little bit.
Right. Like, oh, I can get away with that just a little bit.
Everyone's clocking that. The goalposts are moving a little.
Yes.
Which means that every infraction is a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Which means that contract cannot be broken, or everything will fall apart, but also that it is broken all the time.
Just a little.
Little by little.
Yes.
But, on paper, the whole thing, meaning society, only works if we all play by the same agreed-upon rules.
Yes.
Because once it becomes optional to follow the rules, then everyone who remains bound to rules becomes exploited.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And by the end of the movie, every single other character in the world is strong-arming and overpowering Rosemary.
Yes, it's like the norm has shifted and reversed. And so so the social contract is now dog eat dog, take care of yourself, state of nature, animal world.
Yes.
So she's the odd one out. So her playing by the rules no longer works because the rules are out the window.
Yes, it's the contract of nature at that point. The rules have completely changed.
I mean, this is the world that things like Succession play with, right? Like the idea that actually people who are trying to play by the rules are suckers and they're not getting what they can get. So we are just screwing everybody over.
Right. It doesn't have to be a horror movie. It doesn't have to be fantasy. It doesn't have to be The Purge. In a lot of ways, this is how things work.
Sure.
And I feel like this problem is ever present, both throughout the movie and like we're sort of expanding it into now in the wider world. Because that same polite instinct to let the pushy neighbors steamroll you a little bit, it's universal. But it does paint you as a target.
Yeah.
And a pushover and a mark for further exploitation.
Yes.
But again, we're stumbling into a paradox, sort of a hopeless trap here. Because we do have to all bend a little. We should excuse some rudeness, ignore a little bit of cruelty. Someone's having a bad day, whatever. There's an impulse to forgive, to move on, to allow people to screw up a little bit, to give them a margin of error. I think that's natural and good, and we should encourage that.
Yeah.
But the only people who don't extend that courtesy are the ones causing the problem.
Yes.
But that state of nature, of greed and desire, domination, the lusting after power, that's also universal. Because it has existed everywhere, always, and within every person who's ever lived.
Of course, yeah.
That instinct, that state of nature, is there in us because we're just mammals.
Yeah, because we're animals.
We're mammals with adverbs. We're not any better than the rest of the animal kingdom.
Uh-huh.
That impulse is still right there baked into our DNA.
Sure.
And what Rosemary's Baby does, without showing us flashes of tigers eating gazelles or a clumsy way that you could have communicated these ideas, what it does is tease that temptation and self-interest in the whole cast at all times. And the magic trick here is that we, as the audience, paying really close attention to these simple sets, just people walking around a little bit and talking, eating, whatever, we're very tuned into every little action that they're doing. We dismiss this. We dismiss the temptation and the self-interest. We excuse their actions because they're just tired. Maybe they're cranky. Maybe she's kind of oblivious to how she's coming off. Until we see at the very end when they're screaming, "Hail Satan," we've got the Antichrist in the bassinet, until we see at that moment their true ambitions.
Yes.
We see that will to power dramatized. It's a very uncomfortable trick that has been hard for me to shake in the last couple days, because it's not that they are suddenly 6-foot-tall, cloven-hooved demons at the end.
Right.
They were these people all along.
Right, and they still look exactly the same. It's not like they're wearing all these cloaks and there's like candles. Like, they're all wearing their normal clothes. The only difference is the black bassinet with the upside-down crucifix. So they're being as self-interested and gross as they have been the whole time. Yes.
And we ignored it and hand-waved it away. It almost creates a feeling of complicity in us as the audience. Like, we should have taken better care of Rosemary.
Yeah.
We should have called these people out more. But then we stumble into another paradox, because what else are we supposed to do?
Yeah, like, what could Rosemary have done to avoid this?
And how else do you run a society? Do you banish and exile everyone at the first infraction of being rude or selfish?
Do you immediately assume that your weird next door neighbor must be a Satanist trying to take your baby and just like don't let them talk to you and don't like be friendly with your neighbors.
Right.
Because, like, by all accounts, of course they should have gone over to their nice neighbor's apartment for dinner. Like, that's the nice thing to do, especially because, like, their sort of pseudo daughter had just died. It's like, yeah, of course I'm going to go to dinner with this nice old lady. Like, it's good to have a friend. It's good to be friendly with your neighbors. So what else could she have done?
Right. There's no good answer here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're supposed to be left with, and the thing that we take away from the movie, is that this social contract, which is necessary for our survival, happiness, our growth, is delicate, fragile, and permanently precarious.
So are you going to then argue that the social contract is a contract with the devil?
No,
is that where you're going?
Okay. Even I don't have that hubris.
Okay, all right. Sorry. My mistake. I thought I could guess.
Faustus was the way in. We've sort of moved past him.
Okay, gotcha.
Taken from this angle, what I want to close with, sort of, is that the true villain of this movie isn't a secret coven of witches. It isn't even the demon in the bassinet. It is that social contagion.
Okay.
It's that muscle memory and temptation of the state of nature that lives within all of us. Because we can return back to that in 1 second. It can open the floodgates and we have another gold rush. It's natural and within us.
That's what every apocalypse story plays with. Like, the second the zombie apocalypse happens, it's all hell. Like, there's no turning back. It's grab your guns and your family and screw everybody else. Yeah.
Which you see every time the electricity goes out. You see that every time.
Everybody's trying to, like, stocking up on their groceries, trying to, like, take all the stuff. I want all the bottled water. I want all of the, boxed cereal that's not going to go bad in the pantry while the power's out.
A snowstorm, an ice storm, a pandemic. It's natural and within us, and it will reappear in a second.
Yeah.
And you don't have to turn into a cloven hoof demon. It's right there because we are humans.
Yikes.
State of nature is baked in. And Rosemary's Baby as a whole is a haunting reminder of that fact. It is an X-ray of our fraying nerves. And possibly, I want to argue that this is the type of evil that the film is most interested in. Because we never get to see the quote-unquote demon.
Right.
There's not even an attempt at practical effects or CGI.
No, we don't see the
whatever.
baby at all.
No.
Yeah.
But we do get 2 straight hours full blast of watching this mask slip away.
Yeah.
And there's no defeating this monster. It's like that Hitchcock or Jaws idea of hearing the monster, knowing it's there but not seeing it is so much scarier.
Yes.
Because you can run away from or defeat a demon or whatever the horror monster is. You can defeat that. You can escape that. But this type of evil is a gas leak. It's an idea. It is everywhere. It is not optional. It's not dependent on any religious faith. It is universal and ever-present.
And it doesn't rest on one person or even one family or one group of people. Like, it's humanity as a whole.
And that's what makes Rosemary's Baby as a film so unsettling and unshakable. And over the past couple of days, it has just hit me in these shockwaves.
Interesting. I really, really like that because we watched this movie and we both liked it a lot, but we were like, we don't have a podcast about this. Like, this was good, but whatever. And I was thinking, this is very much playing on like societal fears about like it's the satanic panic thing, right? Like this fear of people who might be worshiping the devil, this fear of, nonconformist religious practices or occult practices.
Alternative lifestyles,
right? And also, which is like speaks to a larger fear about the sort of dismantling of the American family, right? The nuclear family. This is coming out in the 60s, right? So this fear of the central familial ideal coming apart. Like nobody wants that, right? What's scarier than someone trying to take your baby away and your like husband lying to you and your whole family crumbling? Like that's terrifying. And so that's sort of what I was thinking that this movie is really focused on, and I still think it is, but I think what you're talking about here makes total sense. And what you said has also made me think about something you said earlier about how over the course of the film Rosemary loses her her agency, and what was the other one?
Her individuality. Her privacy.
Yes. And it made me think about, I'm not a mom. We're not, Cam and I are not parents, but I know people who are parents, and I've talked to people and heard from people, etc. And something that I've been hearing a lot lately, especially from moms, is this experience of the act of having a child in becoming a parent, they lose who they are as a person. They no longer exist as their own person who does their own things and has their own interests in life and hobbies and friends and passions and anything. And instead, their whole world starts to revolve around their child, which is like normal and understandable, but you start to completely lose your individuality. And especially if you are a pregnant person, you lose all kinds of agency and freedom and privacy. Everybody's touching your belly. You're going to the doctor every week. Someone's poking and prodding and all up in you every week. And your body is no longer your own. Your body is literally like the home and life source and food source of another individual as you're carrying this child, and your whole world and life changes. And so I think this movie is talking about this societal thing you're discussing, but I think it's also playing into like this very real fear and complication that people have around parenthood, which is a really, I think, subversive idea to tackle in the 1960s when like you're not supposed to talk about that. You're supposed to talk about how having children is the most amazing thing ever. And for so many people it is. And one doesn't diminish the other. But I think that's a really interesting idea to be playing with in this movie.
And I think for a lot of people, that is a wonderful transformation in identity.
Yeah.
To have yourself defined by not just who you are, but that you are a parent.
Yes. And this doesn't have to be a bad thing.
No, I know. But I'm getting to another thing because I think there's sort of a sleight of hand trick that the movie makes here, because a lot of people love being a parent. They love that is their defining quality and the job that is 24/7 until the day they die. Yeah. They want that sense of family and community. But over the course of this film, watching this woman, as she's becoming a mother, become slowly robbed of every single thing in her life.
Right. Like this is like a complete extreme version of that fear.
And then the consolation prize she gets at the end is that she gets to raise this possible Antichrist. It makes that title, Rosemary's Baby, feel almost savagely sarcastic.
Oh, sure.
And bitter.
Yeah.
Because she's lost everything.
Yes.
And now the baby's not even hers.
Yeah.
And then she's getting this throwaway.
And the title isn't even about her. It's about her baby. So, yeah.
But I think it's about the apostrophe.
Yes.
I think it's about the question of the possessive. And how
Does
much
she own
has.
This baby?
Well, I think it's how much she's lost. I think it's that Rosemary doesn't have anything. I don't think after the word Rosemary's, I don't think you can put anything.
No,
she's
she
robbed of all of it.
only has the baby, and she barely has the baby.
and there are these cascade of revelations throughout the film that the baby is not her husband's. That she was also, even if it was her husband's, that her husband assaulted her to conceive the baby.
Right, so it wasn't even her choice to have this baby at this exact time. Yeah.
Or she was assaulted by the devil.
Right.
And then the baby's almost being raised by this group of crazy people.
Right.
So
yeah.
in no way is the baby hers.
Yeah, and
by the end of it.
And she loses, her own bodily autonomy, and her relationship with her husband crumbles. But also, you see her lose her relationship with her friends, which is something that happens to parents in real life. Is when you have a baby, your whole like social life changes, because it's like either people who don't have parents don't get it and your schedules don't align, or you have friends who do have kids, but they also are struggling with timelines and naps and all the complications of being new parents. And so her whole social life falls apart too. We see that here.
I think the most interesting decision in the movie is that when she finds all of this out, she doesn't run screaming.
Yeah.
She just sort of numbly walks through the room, and then she starts to rock the baby.
Yes.
And she's going to stay with him. And I think that is sort of the final word here on the social contract, state of nature, the tension between those things. Because yes, we're seeing how easily that social contract is broken and or completely disregarded. Mm-hmm. But it's also that Rosemary, as the only person who obeys those rules and upholds those standards, how natural that is as an instinct as well in people. To want to get along with people and be social and feel safe, and all the consolation she gives other people throughout the film, that she's still willing to give away everything she has in her life and not run screaming and save herself, but stay there and try to help this baby.
Yeah.
Which we can't even define what it is at this point.
So she's completely given up her identity as a person who like maintains,
but she
plays by the rules and just stays to be with
the only thing she has left is the generosity of that social contract.
Yes.
Which she seems to be lending even to the baby at the end of the film.
Yeah.
So it hasn't broken her spirit.
Yeah, I guess
these
you're right.
dual sort of faiths. Everyone else has just the state of nature. And she seems, after she's robbed of everything else in the film, she has just the social contract.
Yes.
And the fact that she doesn't give up on that,
right,
that she remains unshakable in that final moment, is an incredible statement about humanity. I think that's an optimistic place to leave the film.
Interesting.
It's also a pretty incredible statement about mothers.
Yeah.
And one that has rung true in my experience.
Yeah.
That you will lose everything else and still hold on to these beliefs for the future of your kid.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's really interesting.
For being an ending that should be the tablecloth pull, that should be kicking down the door and ruining everything. There's a wonderful twist. There are so many sleight of hand tricks happening in this movie. And maybe to throw it to you guys in the audience, whether you're on Patreon or YouTube or wherever, have you read the book?
Oh, yeah.
The book which came out a little bit earlier in the 60s by Ira Levin. Is the book good? Does the book introduce a lot of these ideas where they sort of whipped up in the screenplay? Because I would love to read more of this. I'd love to see the source text.
Yes.
So let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about this movie, because it's been around for a long time. And if you want to join us on our continuing march through the history of horror and all sorts of other art, and we talk about fantasy every Friday, we talk about all sorts of wonderful art, you can join us on YouTube, you can listen to us on the podcast, or you can get even more bonus episodes over on Patreon. You can subscribe for $2 a month, and for that you get the entire back catalog of exclusive bonus episodes. Going back a year and a half, we're doing 2 this month, over 2 hours of content discussing wonderful works of art. I think we're talking about 14 different works of art just in the bonus episodes this month. Never mind episodes every Tuesday and Friday. So there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. We hope you enjoyed this chat and that you'll join us for future ones. Maggie, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
thank you for entertaining my theory.
It's been fun. Well, and thank you for showing me this movie in a new light and making me think about it in different ways. It's been fun.
You open with Faustus. That's the shot, and then the chaser is something you spend a lot of time on.
Sure. I love that. Well, thank you for doing this. This has been fun.
Sure. All right. We'll see you in just a few days for a brand new episode. Thank you for joining us. Farewell.
Bye.